Warm welcome to today's talk. It's Saturday, the 11th of March. Now, there's been some pretty interesting developments in the lab leak hypothesis, which is slightly more than a hypothesis now, I think. It's very encouraging that all of the American Senate and all of the American House of Representatives, 100% of all the senators and all the congressmen in the states voted for the president to sign a bill for the intelligence services to release all the information they have on the Wuhan lab leak. Looking at that in a minute. We'll also be looking at the somewhat disappointing response of the British government, although there are some courageous MPs that we'll talk about. But we're going to start off with something from an Oxford professor who's got pretty good insight into the publishing, I won't use the word racket, that's the disappointing state of publishing, of medical and scientific publishing that's occurred over the past few years. Here's the poster for today, Barriers to Transparency. And that's the barrier, and I think they might well be found to be unwelcome. As always, posters are available for free download. I'll post the link with the textbooks completely free. I just kind of like the idea of people having these posters on their bedroom walls around about the world for some reason, because I think they do send a message, which is important. Now, straight down to business. This is Professor Anton van der Meer, Professor of Molecular Immunology at Oxford University, as we said. Wuhan researchers were importing back coronaviruses. Yep, they were. Very similar ones to the ones from the pandemic, but not the same. Had applied for grants to increase their infectiousness. In other words, gain of function research. So it looks increasingly probable that there was gain of function research going on. I can't say it definitively because that's not what the professor says, but that's it certainly applied for these licenses. Now, he talked about the false impressions given in journals. This one here is from The Lancet that we've looked at a couple of times. This article in The Lancet said, "We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin." This is inexcusable that this was published in a scientific journal. Now, this is not me. Well, I'm saying this, of course, but Bob Seeley, Member of Parliament for Isle of Wight in the UK. It's pathetic. I like his language. I like non-political language. I know what he means. It's pathetic, and it is pathetic. You have this unholy, unethical alliance of scientists working together through highly influential publications, effectively, to kibosh what may be a scientific truth. I agree, it is completely outrageous. The way that the scientific journals have let us down, in this case, The Lancet. I mean, before this started, The Lancet was just beyond reproach, and then it publishes this stuff. And, myself and Bob Seeley aren't happy. And I'm sure you're not either. And get it pushed into the realms of conspiracy theory, which it was. Facebook banned any posts for ages relating to this. We need to be asking tough questions about the origins, otherwise who knows what virus will be released next. I just hate to think, but I agree with him. Through incompetence and ambition, how many more millions might be killed? Incompetence and ambition. So we've got these sort of vain scientists, somewhat, I'm resisting using crude terminology, somewhat infatuated with their own importance. And they're doing these experiments, risking millions of lives, partly for their own ego. Why aren't they regulated? This is why we have governments, to regulate this kind of thing. Anyway, through incompetence and ambition, how many more millions are going to kill? This is all Bob Seeley talking. This is not some political game. We've got to find out where this thing came from. If you've had a virus that suddenly emerged from a few hundred yards from Porton Down, in this country, you wouldn't be able to get away with it. He's right. We need to find out where it came from so we can stop the next one. Porton Down is the biological warfare facility in this country, of course. So if the virus had arisen from a few miles away from Porton Down, people would say, just a minute, call me stupid, but isn't that just a few miles away from Porton Down where all these viruses are kept? And yet when it's the Wuhan Institute of Virology, oh no, it's nothing to do with it. It's preposterous. I had another thought myself. What if it was a few miles from Camp Dietrich in Maryland? You know, maybe somewhere between Camp Dietrich and the Moderna factory, for example. in Maryland. I think the Moderna factory's in Maryland. If this had just popped up a few miles from Camp Detrick, it's pure coincidence as a few miles from Camp Detrick. People would be all over the American government like a rash if this happened. Anyway, it didn't. It popped up a few miles from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Professor of molecular biology again goes on. I've got quite a few quotes in this because I don't want to get it wrong. The conflict arises from the fact that researchers platform and want to continue to perform and continue want to perform precisely the sorts of experiments that make a lab leak much more likely. So the very things that make a lab leak likely are what they're doing. These gain-of-function experiments, and they are experiments, where they investigate whether they can enable by genetic modification an animal virus to infect a human cell. So they say to this virus, come on, infect this human cell for me, will you please? Let me just tinker around with your genetics. Right, now go and try again. Infect this human cell. I mean, I might start a pandemic, but you know, I want to get a publication. I want promotion in my university. It's just a disgrace. It is agreed that this could help us identify potentially dangerous organisms in the wild and so prevent pandemics. This seems unlikely. So this professor here is Professor Vandermeer saying, Oxford University, saying, look, this idea that you have to do gain-of-function research to prevent human pandemics is a load of tosh, basically, if I can paraphrase the professor. It seems unlikely. What is more likely is that these organisms will infect those doing the experiments who could unwittingly spread the virus to the community and possibly the whole world, which of course has happened, or may well have happened. Little justification for doing such experiments except for scientific curiosity, which is excellent in its place, but not when it risks the whole population, and desire for prestige, which is just completely outrageous. So that was the first part of this new discussion. Now, the next bit is the US position. Very interesting. So all of Senate and all of Congress have voted unanimously. Can President Biden ignore the will of all of the congressmen and all of the senators and veto this? I don't know what the American Constitution is. I don't think he can, actually, if it's a two-thirds majority. Do let me know if you know about American constitutional affairs. I'm not that familiar with it. But they've all voted, 100% of them. Republicans, Democrats, 100% across the board have voted for this intelligence to be released. So it has to be released. I can't really see any way around this. So I think the cases will be proved soon. So, Senate passed it last week. House of Representatives voted Republicans and Democrats 419-0. Has that ever happened before in the history of the House? Certainly, no time I can remember. Completely unanimous, and in Senate as well. They want to know. We want to know. The public has to know. We need to prevent the next pandemic. Requiring the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines at the moment, to declassify all intelligence. That includes activities performed by the Wuhan Institute of Virology or on behalf of the People's Liberation Army, so military implications. What do the American intelligence services know? We don't know, but my guess is quite a bit. My guess is they know quite a bit. Coronavirus research or other related activities performed at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the workers who got sick. Basically, they want to know everything that is known. Now, from when President Biden signs this declaration, he does sign it, and we assume he will pretty soon, they've got 90 days to get their act together. Department of Energy and FBI, of course, have both come out and said it's the most probable scenario. House Permanent Select Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner. The American public deserve answers to every aspect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Absolutely, Mr. Turner, we agree completely, including how this virus was created and specifically whether it was a natural occurrence or whether it was a lab leak related event. We want to know. Dr. Robert Redfield, you might remember we talked about Robert Redfield quite a bit in 2020, maybe 2021. Former director of the CDC. I still believe today that the data indicates that the outbreak of COVID-19 was more likely the result of a lab leak than as a result of a natural spillover event. And of course, Dr. Redfield had access to a lot of information that the rest of us didn't. So that was Dr. Robert Redfield, former director of the CDC. Representative Greg Murphy in the House believed Dr. Anthony Fauci knew it came from a lab and tried to cover it up. Wow, this is what this is a quote from from Mr. Greg Murphy. He might be a doctor, I don't know, but he's a congressman. In January 2020, Dr. Fauci received emails that promulgated that COVID-19 looked engineered and not from the wild. Wow. This is from Mr. Murphy. Yet 3 weeks later, to save his own skin, he commissioned a scientific paper which debunked the lab theory. I have no way of knowing that. I'm just quoting what Mr. Murphy says. He was academically and intellectually dishonest, which is not what we want. We don't want any of these. Not at all, because they are unwelcome. The truth is that Dr. Fauci and his institution funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money to promote dangerous gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology without proper guardrails. Oh dear. So that's what Mr. Murphy said. Wow. And presumably the American intelligence data will confirm this one way or the other. What was conspiracy theory is now looking like it may be fact. We wouldn't expect congressmen to talk without any basis in evidence, would we? Representative Jim Hines. I think he might be Democrat actually, but anyway, Representative Jim Hines in the Congress again. He's not so sure about this. There's not one iota of evidence for any of that, but he still wants the evidence released. But this is Mr. Jim Hines, Congressman. At every juncture, the People's Republic of China government has obfuscated and obstructed legitimate inquiry investigation into the origin of the disease. I'm afraid that appears to be true. China's approach has been deeply irresponsible and dangerous to global public health. I'm afraid that is also, on the balance of probabilities, reflects the actuality of the situation. Sad to say. These are political statements, not by me, in this case by a politician, Mr. Jim Hines. Now, Matt Hancock, of course, our colourful former Secretary of State for Health. I won't say disgrace. Some might say disgrace. I would say colourful. He's painted himself with a lot of that colour going on celebrity programmes and things, really quite undignified in the view of many. But anyway, asked to remove passages from Pandemic Diaries. That's his book. So he wrote this book. Now, to his credit, it looks like, of course, we don't know because it's been redacted from the book. But it looks like Mr. Hancock had written passages in the book saying this virus could have come from a laboratory leak in China. Or he may have said, I've got definitive evidence that it came from a laboratory leak in China. We don't know because it's been redacted. We don't know. I'd like to know what that said, actually, but riffraff like you and me aren't allowed to know in my country, in England's green and pleasant land and Scotland's rolling hills and Wales and Northern Ireland. We're not allowed to know this, which, of course, is... in my view, shows contempt for the thinking classes, such as you and hopefully me, who are able to process this information in a meaningful way, but you can't know. Secret, redacted, crossed out. All we can say is it questioned the official Chinese version. So quite what did Mr. Hancock write in his book? We don't know. Was it a slam dunk? Was it a maybe if... depending, we don't know. We're not allowed to know. We're not allowed to know. So he had his book. Signed off by Simon Case, Cabinet Secretary. Letter confirming compliance with the Radcliffe rules. Dear Matt, I'm writing to confirm your compliance with the Radcliffe rules regarding your forthcoming memoir, Pandemic Diaries. Thank you for your cooperation throughout this process. Good old Matt, eh? Cooperated with the process. That's cooperated with the process of redacting this information so you and me can't know. Now, I'm not saying Matt Hancock had any leeway in this. He would be... Basically, you don't argue with the Cabinet Office. That is the power of the state behind it. And if they say jump, you jump. So don't blame Mr. Hancock in any way for this. But so unfortunate that the Cabinet Office chose to take this opaque option, keeping us in ignorance when I want to be informed. So this is Mr. Simon Case, Cabinet Secretary, Oxbridge man, of course. Concerned they will not. There's anything wrong with that. It's just kind of almost a stereotypical way to some senior ranks in the UK. Concerned they would cause problems. Well, yeah. So in other words, look. You might have the truth, Matt, but we don't want any trouble, so shut up, will you? Just cross it out. Don't rip out those pages. Don't let the riffraff know. I find this infuriating, actually. Patronising. Could damage national security. Don't think so. I mean, what is the point of having a country if you can't challenge a narrative from another country? It's just we need to know the truth here. We just want the truth. The Cabinet Office position before this was entirely coincidental that the lab that it was close to a Chinese government laboratory. As I say, if it had been close to Fort Detrick or close to Porton Down, would we have happily written it off as such a coincidence? Don't think so. Spokesman for our Prime Minister. The UK wants to see a robust, transparent and science-led review, believing all possibilities remain on the table until that is concluded. Sounds good, but then the caveat, if evidence is presented by the World Health Organization. Don't hold your breath on that one, Mr. Sunak. Do not hold your breath waiting for the WHO to do something profound on this, because you'll turn blue. So there we go. It looks like American intelligence is going to be released in the next few months. Then we'll have something definitive. Senior academics in this country know things, it would appear. Matt Hancock knows things, but he's muzzled. Pity. So what could happen immediately? Could I call on the Cabinet Office? In fact, yeah, I'll do this. I call on the Cabinet Office to allow Mr. Hancock to write an appendices for his book containing the redacted passages on the lab leak theory. Just get your pen out, sign it just the way you signed that letter, and let us know. Thank you. And thank you, of course, for watching.